Okay, Rabbi Say, we're back at it. Halacha of inheritance, Yerusha. Here we go. Once again, I'm going to start off with the reminder that I said last week a couple times. Write a will, write a halachic will, because there's too many nice families that have been ripped apart when the parents could have just taken a couple of hours' time and a couple of $1,000 and had a family that was normal. Instead, they have 10, 20 years of fighting. Nobody goes to anybody else's simchas because they didn't act properly. They just go and write the will. Don't let them fight. I know how nice and trustworthy they are, and I know how much they love each other, but when it comes to money, people are funny. And that's not a new story. This story has been going on for hundreds of years, and the Rabbanim for hundreds and hundreds of years have been writing to write a will and a halachic will, as we'll discuss. Number two, just a reminder for those in America, you should have a medical power of attorney, a medical proxy. Download the Aguda form, fill it out, put your kid or whoever else you trust on it, because what the Goyim call medical ethics and call value of life, we call murder. So quality of life, we call that murder. So write that, please, because if you don't, the hospital may have the right to decide, and not your children, and not your Rav. Okay, it works out a lot better for the insurance company also if you pull the plug. It's a lot cheaper. Fine. Weiter. So we were discussing what the items have Yerusha and what items don't have Yerusha. What items are muhsik, what items are roi. So let's get involved. So something that's very common is what we call a trust. Now, just let's give a basic description for those that are unfamiliar with what a trust is. A trust is an entity. It's something that there should be a mesechta on this. Definitely there should be a Reb Chaim on this for sure. It is a separate entity to the person that could own and have control over an item. So, and it has instructions on it, written in it, what to do with that item. Whether that item is a house, whether that item is a life insurance policy, whether it's all your assets. There could be a million different variations of what you put. You put a lottery ticket. Whatever it is that you want to put into that trust, you can put lots of things into the trust. And the question is, since we do not have a Masechtas trust, and in Halacha, we don't really have this concept. And by the way, until a couple hundred years ago, nobody else had this concept either. It's a relatively new creation, and it was created based on the theme of capitalism, which only became popular in the last couple hundred years. So, how do we treat this in Halacha? This new entity, which we seemingly, beforehand we only had that things could be owned by people. The closest thing that I could think of in Gemara terms is Tfisas Habayis, that after somebody dies, before they start dividing which son gets which, they call that interim period, we call it probate in English, as Tfisas Habayis. So that's the closest thing I could think of, but it's not really the same. Okay, so let's see how we're going to view it in Halacha. So, like this. There are two categories of trusts. One category, and by the way, some people have the misconception that trusts are only for those very wealthy people. It's not true. So a lot of times people will write trusts to avoid having too many assets in their name that they could qualify for Medicaid and have the government pay for nursing homes instead of, why should I use my own money for nursing homes if I could use all the government's money for nursing homes? And they'll make a Medicaid trust. So there's lots of people, even if they're not wealthy, that use trust. Don't think it's limited to wealthy people. Okay, so there's two basic categories of trust. There's a revocable or revocable trust and an irrevocable trust. A revocable trust is the type that the one who makes the trust, referred to as the grantor or the settler, the guy who made the trust, the parent in our classic example, so a revocable trust allows them to go back and revoke, change the terms of the trust, and they could decide that they want to get rid of the trust. So they could put their assets into the trust, their house or whatever other assets it is into the trust, and they can decide later that they want to take it out. That's a revocable trust. So let's start off discussing a revocable trust. So there's also something called a trustee. A trustee is the one who has title of he's the one who decides how to invest this whatever's inside, or how to treat it, or he's the one who's acting on paying the bills, etc. He's the one who's officially in charge, is the settler. Now, often in a revocable trust, the type where the owner still maintains control, usually while he is alive, he is also the trustee. Most of the time, not always. So if the father, in our example, or the parents, are the grantor, the settlers of the trust, it's a revocable trust, and they're the trustees, they have all the control. So from our halachic standpoint, we're going to view that as if it's still in their rishus. Because this is just technical games, playing with qualifying for this or qualifying for that, playing with taxes, there's a lot of different reasons, avoiding probate. There's various reasons why you might do this type of trust. But from a halachic standpoint, if you maintain all the control and all the decision making, so from halacha, we're going to say you're still the owner and complete Yerusha will apply.
And if somebody else is a trustee?
So now we're going to get into the next. Next category is, what happens often, is the grantor, the settler, is either they were never the trustee, they gave it to somebody who was more financially savvy, and hopefully not a crook, and he was the trustee. Or, a lot of times they'll be the trustee, but when, it's time, they're already getting to, they're 80 years old, they're not so sharp anymore. At that point, they appoint their two of their children as the trustee, which is very, very common. Now, these types of trusts generally say when the settler or the grantor dies, so the estate, the trustee, is supposed to give out the trust to the beneficiaries of the trust. He's supposed to give to each beneficiary how it is allotted in the trust. So if you think about that, when we were discussing last week mitzvah l'kayim divrei ames, and we said that a secular will does not mekayim mitzvah, it's not considered mitzvah l'kayim divrei ames, does not apply to a secular will, bepashtus, because we said there's different criteria that you need. You need it to be deposited biyad shlish, according to many, or you need direct instructions what to do. Well, wait a second. Over here, when it's in a trust, it's in a third party somewhat. I know there's a little bit to debate how we treat this entity of the trust. But once there's a trustee, somebody who makes the decisions, in a way it's in that trustee's hands. And if in a way it's in that trustee's hands, there's a good argument to say, and bepashtus mitzvah l'kayim divrei ames applies, because it's kind of in the trustee's hands, and it has clear instructions to the trustee how he's supposed to distribute the contents of the trust, and memela bepashtus mitzvah l'kayim divrei ames applies. It's still a good idea to write a halachic will, because one could still argue it's not really in the rishus of the trustee, because usually there's terms on the trust, and he can't do whatever he wants with it, so it's not completely in his hands, although that argument probably is not a good argument, because when I give it to a shomer, I usually don't give the shomer complete rights to do whatever he wants either. So b'pashtus, once again, also when doing this trust, if you're trying to do it for the halachic purpose, you might want a proper kinyan to give it over to the trustee, so to speak. However, once you're doing that proper kinyan, you're probably doing a halachic trust anyways. So, halachic will, I'm sorry. So the Mesa, if this is all you have, a revocable trust with a trustee who is different to the settler, you will probably have Yerusha, and you'll probably have that one kid that's not happy with what he got from the Yerusha, and he's going to find that one Bezdin that says Yerusha doesn't apply. And that's how it will work. So therefore, still write a halachic will, even though it probably does work. Okay, next category is a irrevocable trust. The irrevocable trust is something that you cannot go back on that. There's advantages of doing this. Often has to do with avoiding estate taxes and etc. There's reasons to put it in an irrevocable trust. Now, if it's put in this irrevocable trust, the control is not only given over to the trustee. By the way, the grantor settler can't be the trustee on an irrevocable trust. It has to be a third-party trustee. Once again, most of the time, it's going to be people's kids who are going to be the trustee. Now, over here, from a pure legal standpoint, the title of the asset, of the property or whatever it is, has actually been handed over to the trustee. From a pure legal standpoint, it doesn't belong to the parent anymore. It belongs to the trustee or to the trust, and the trustees are the ones who control it. Generally it's done what we call a life estate, or irrevocable trust, life estate trust, which would mean that the parents still have rights to the peiros. They're still able to live in the house, and they still are able to live off the gains of the assets in the trust, but they have no ownership of the contents of the trust. That's generally how it works. But once again, there's all sorts of variations, but that is the standard. Now over here, the Pashtus is there's no Yerusha. Why? It doesn't belong to the parents anymore. The parents have already relinquished control. And since the parents have relinquished control, then there would be no Yerusha. However, it's still good to write a halachic will, as we're going to discuss soon, because this could be debated for three reasons. There's three arguments to say that it doesn't really belong to the trustees. First of all, if the trustees die, does it go down to the trustees' kids? No. So it must mean that they're not the real owners. Secondly, could the trustees do whatever they want with it? No. So once again, they're not real owners. There is a concept that we do see, it's a machlokes of koine almanas liknois. It's a sugi in the dharm. So there's a machlokes whether that's considered a proper kinyan. If I give something to my kid, it's really a generation skipping trust. In trust land, I work in this a little bit, so I know the trust world. So it's really like a generation skipping trust. Do we consider that an ownership to the mid-generation, which they have no rights to it, but we want it to go, not the classical generation skipping trust, the type where you're trying to mess over your kids, but you want to help out your grandkids, that type. Is that considered ownership to the middle generation over here, where you're giving it to them, and it could be even before the third generation is born, but you're giving it to the second generation to give it over to the third generation? L'maisa we paskin is the kinyan. So since l'maisa we paskin is the kinyan, but it's machlokes, so it's not so pashut, but l'maisa we paskin is a kinyan. So, but that's a reason not to like it. As we said, if the trustee dies, it doesn't go to only his kids; it goes to all the beneficiary. The trustee doesn't need to be a beneficiary. It could be a total outside party. So let's just use it like that. If the trustee is a total outside party, then he doesn't get anything. So it's not a real ownership on the trustee. And thirdly, a very important point is, even though from a pure legal standpoint in secular law, the settler has no ownership, the father has no ownership. Let's face it, IRS, close your ears for 2 minutes. A lot of times, the parents really have complete control of the assets. They just tell their son, who's the trustee, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, or, and they maintain control over the trust, even though from a pure legal standpoint, they're not allowed to, and it's not theirs, and etc. But a lot of times, let's face it, we all know what's going on. All right, IRS, you could listen again. So therefore, there's a good argument to say that they never really relinquished control. Therefore, once again, if you want to know about pashtus in such a case when it's an irrevocable trust, we would say there's no Yerusha. It could be debated. So once again, write halachic will. Fine. So tachlis, how do you write halachic will? What does this mean? I write a will and I prepare on top halacha. What does that help? If a will doesn't work, we just discussed. It's true that Moshe and Achiezer say that we rely on secular wills, and that's the minhag. But Rav Yoshev and Roy Poiskim say that we don't rely on secular wills. So what's this halachic will stuff? You know, a halachic will by definition is going to be problematic. Why? You could write whatever you want on the paper, but the second the guy dies, there's automatic Yerusha Halacha. So what is what you're going to write on a paper really help? So what could you do? How do you how does one who wants to split it up, let's say equally with his children, how does he do it? So one option is, just very simple, let's start off from the basics, the drawing board, gift it. So you want your girls to have something, so give them a gift. You have 5 kids and $5 million, 3 boys, 2 girls, so give each girl $1 million gift, and then you're good. However, the problem with that is very simple. You know, once again, we quoted that sefer in the beginning, I forget what it was called, that said that you should write a will when you're 50. All right, a lot of people don't write when they're 50, they write it when they're 60, let's say. But you know, they're still in business. They want their assets. They're not interested in giving over their assets yet, you know. And waiting until you're 86 is not always the best idea. So giving your assets, yeah, that would work maybe, but that's not such a good idea. Another option...
You're not giving it to them at the time when you write the will, are you?
No, usually not. I'm just suggesting as a potential option, and I'm just explaining the obvious downside to that option.
But that option, if he's 60 years old, and he's not giving it now when he's 60, it's only going to be when he dies at 90.
Oh, no, the first option, which I said,
Right now.
is just to give it right now.
Right now.
Right now, but the obvious downside is most people don't want to. The next one is, we see this often in the Gemara, I'm giving it mehayoim ulachar misa. A very strange lashon. We see it in the Gemara often. Mehayoim ulachar misa, from today and after I die. Well, that's a contradiction. Is it today or is it after I die? Which one is it? So, oh, I know, I forgot. You know, I skipped one. There's one option of that. I want it to be sha'achas lifnei misasai. I want to give it a minute before I die. The problem with right now saying I want to give something a minute before I die, there's a couple problems. First problem is maybe I'm never able to sell something or do any act of bailus with my assets. Who said that you're not a minute before you die? Right? Any moment you might be too late. And you might never be able to affect the transaction on your assets because it might always be within that minute before you die. Secondly, if I say right now, I'm giving to Zev all my assets, right? I'm giving to Zev all my assets, right? Let's say I say that, right? I'm giving to Zev all my assets, there's a problem. All the assets that I get later on, I can't be makna now, and Zev doesn't just want my assets now. Zev wants my assets that I'm going to acquire later as well. So it will only work for the assets that I have right now. So those are some of the faults with sha'achas name sasei. Sorry. Okay, what about the option meyoim la'achar misa? That contradictory lashon. It's today and after I die. So what does that mean, today after I die? So Chazal explain, what does that contradictory lashon mean? There's 2 elements, 2 sections to an object. There's the actual nechasim and the peiros. There's the actual object and what it produces. So what that means is I'm giving you today title of the asset. However, I'm holding on to the peiros, whatever income it generates. What we call in the asset world a life estate. So I'm giving over now to my daughters, right? I have $5 million, 3 boys, 2 girls. I'm giving each one of my girls $1 million right now of an asset. But I'm maintaining all the income, and that's what I want. I want the income. Now, the downside to this approach is that, first of all, let's say I want to sell it in 2 years. I wouldn't be allowed to sell it because it belongs to my daughters. Yeah, you can maybe ask them permission or whatever, and everyone wants to tell their daughters what exactly they're doing, and they definitely want to ask permission, and what if the daughter says no? You know, it's not so cool. Secondly, the meyoim la'achar misa won't affect anything that comes into your estate after you make this, and once again, you do this when you're 50, when you're 60, whatever, you know, plenty more years to generate some more assets, and it will not affect those assets that come into your estate later on. Thirdly, when it comes to certain types of assets like cash, stocks, and bonds, you might need a more complex form of kinyan to give them over. Because these less tangible assets, once again, this could be done, it just makes it more complex to be able to make the right form of kinyanim to transfer those over. Okay. What else is a potential option to use for a halachic will? So, by the way, another problem, I forgot, with the Miyom Lachar Misa, if somebody is at the net worth where they have to worry about estate taxes, there's potential gift tax issues when you gift over to your children the assets right now. However, on the other hand, often you're gifting anyways, and it may actually fit into your plan. So you need it. This is why you should have a firm attorney, among other reasons. Fine. Okay. So what is the prevalent approach? So the prevalent approach is, actually Zev is a great example for we're going to do here. Zev has one boy and 7 girls?
6 girls.
Oh, 6 girls, sorry, 6 girls. 1 boy and 6 girls. So this is, this is a great, Keelan also, what do you have, 2 boys and 6 girls? 2 boys and 7 girls? Okay, fine. 2 and 7? Okay, fine. So we have great examples. Great examples of people that need to write halachic wills. Most definitely. I will ishafalpal. So like this. Okay, Givaldic. So okay, Rabbi say, continuing with the shiur, the recording stopped. So I am just re-recording this now. Okay, so what is the prevalent approach to do? So the prevalent approach, how do you do a halachic will? So the prevalent approach is to write what we've known as a shtar chatzi zachar. What's a shtar chatzi zachar? It's a document that says that, this is how the historical breakup was, that a girl would get half the amount of the boys. Whatever the boy portion was, the girl would get half of that. Now, how does this work? How do they do it? And by the way, as we're going to see soon, it doesn't have to be. It's not limited to exactly half, but that's how the minhag was. So how do you do this? How do you once again, it doesn't make a difference what you write. If you go against what Masnam Ashikasa B'Torah, if you go against the system of the Torah, it doesn't mean anything. It's a Mefershim Mishnah. It doesn't mean anything if you go against the way that it's supposed to be. So who cares what I write on a paper? How does that help? So what do? So number one is you start off with the parent writes how they want everything divided. It's pretty much like a secular will. How they want everything divided, what they want to each child, and we leave in there for the real Yerusha, like the Tashbates. We're going to leave a Davar Chashav aside to have classical rules of Yerusha. And in the arrangement that we're going to discuss, you don't make up, the Bechar got more from the Tashbates' Davar Chashav from that $10,000 or so that you left on the side. Therefore, he's going to get left less in this arrangement. That wouldn't be okay. But you leave the Davar Chashav to classical Yerusha, and outside of that, you split it up however you deem fit. Now, how exactly do you do it? So, number one, you write a regular Yerusha, a regular ashtar that says how you want it to be divided. We'll call that the secular will. Number two is the parents go and they make the father, and he's mischayiv himself a chayiv, which is more than the expected amount of the estate, and he's either mischayiv, there's 2 versions, he's mischayiv to his daughter, or he's mischayiv to some tzedakah organization that you expect is going to be around in 30 years, Hatzalah of wherever. Now let's just use the daughter for starters. So let's say once again, this could be very complicated to figure out what do you expect his estate to be worth. Because, right now he's writing it, as we said, you should write a will when you're 50, maybe 60. But so, right now he's 50 and his net worth is $2 million. What is it going to be in 30, 40, 50 years? Who knows? It could be 8 million. So it's very hard to know. So you do more than the expected amount, and you say, let's say, he's going to make a chayiv for $10 million to the daughter. Then stage 3 is you make a tenai on that chayiv, meaning you say that chayiv that chayiv is null and void if the boys follow my instructions in this the document one that I wrote, the secular will that I wrote. Now, let's just think about, well, what did we just do? What did we just accomplish? So once again, what we just accomplished is that there's going to be halachic Yerusha. Why? Because that document that I wrote has no effect in halacha. So there's going to be simply, I know we discussed that there's possibility of having effect, but just simply speaking, it doesn't have effect. So therefore, it doesn't do anything. Let's say the estate is at the end of the day worth $8 million. But there's a chiyuv, which was chal, I forgot to mention. The chiyuv is chal sha'achas l'fnei misasai. The chiyuv is chal a minute before he dies. So, if before the Yerusha went to the children, there was a $10 million debt on the estate to give to the daughter or give to Atzala or whatever it is, so how much is the value of the Yerusha? 0. The boys are going to have to take the entire Yerusha and give it to their sister. So that's not cool. They're not happy. They don't want to do that. So, however, the boys have a way of being mevatel the chayv. How could the boys be mevatel the chayv? It says that there's a tanai on the chayv, and the chayv is not in effect if the boys decide to gift part of their portion of the Yerusha to the sisters, then the chayv doesn't take effect. So listen, they have a choice. Let's say there's $8 million Yerusha and there's 4 of them, 2 boys, 2 girls. They could either have the full $8 million go to the daughter, or what they could do is agree. Let's say the father wanted it equal. We'll just use that for example, how to keep the math as easy as possible. $2 million for each child. So the boys could take, let's say there was no Bukhar, they each get $4 million, and they each gift $2 million of the Yerusha to their sisters. And now we have $2 million each, and that's in the best interest of the boys. And pretty much what we really have going on here is a classical halachic Yerusha, with the boys having their arms twisted into gifting an equal amount or a half share to their sisters. Now, once again, even if you're going to do this arrangement, and even though, as I did say, really Yerusha does apply, you should still leave outside of this arrangement the davar chashav and tashpetz, that you could have at least a pure, real Yerusha without any shticks or tricks, because that's what you're meant to do. Okay. There are some drawbacks and there are some holes in this approach. So let's try to plug them up. So as mentioned previously, you should not disinherit a child. You should let the child inherit. You shouldn't, even if he's not your favorite child, you're still meant to give him a Yerusha. So let's say you disinherited a child. Now there's going to be a whole hole in this equation. Why? There's going to be we want you to follow the secular document. What would happen if a son would go to Bezdin and say, no, I refuse to follow the secular I refuse to follow this document. I want to do it as the Torah says. So he's allowed to challenge. Now, in the previous case that we discussed, if the son would challenge this agreeing to follow this document, he would get 0 instead of $2 million. But if you disinherited a son, and he's going to get 0 anyways, so what does he care? He'll challenge the document. He'll say he refuses to give up his share, and he'll cause everything to go to the daughter. What does he care? Everything to go to Atzala. A lot of times he'll even be so upset by what happened, and he'll go dafka and do it. So you have to give each kid enough that it's not in his interest to give it up by causing the whole Yerusha to go somewhere else. Also, you have to give that child enough that he's not going to blackmail all the other children into paying him off too much. Because let's say you gave him $5,000. And he's not going to be happy. He's not going to be satisfied with that. So what is Mike going to do? He's going to, listen, I'm going to make sure that everything goes to Hatzala unless you guys pay me up $300,000. $1 million, $2 million, whatever the number is. But you got to realize that disinherited or semi-disinherited child who gets the right or maybe the wrong tayin to help him out, he's going to be able to blackmail the other children into getting what he wants. Okay. Now, I just want to point out, we're going to go into another potential issue that could go wrong with the shtar chatzi zachar. But overall, it solves our big problems. Once again, from the time that he writes this document, all the assets that he acquires post writing this document the shtar chatzi zachar will apply to it. And once again, it's all happening after Misa, the transfer of documents. It's all the transfer of nechasim from the brothers to the sisters is all going to happen after Misa. And really, there's no limitations. The father retains complete control his entire life. And therefore, there's really a lot of advantages to this approach and very little limitations. Let's speak about another potential issue. There's another potential issue of collusion. Let's just pick an extreme example to highlight what could happen. So let's say you have 10 children, 9 boys and 1 girl. And the Yerusha is $9 million. So, actually make it $10 million, easier math. $10 million is the Yerusha. And he writes in the shtar chatzi zachar, he puts a davar chashuv on the side, and outside of that he has $10 million. He wants $1 million to each of his children. Once again, I'm giving her a full share just to keep the math simple. So it's $1 million each. Comes along one son, and don't think this hasn't happened, and he said, you know what? I can't deal with this. We can't go against halacha. This is ridiculous. This is horrible. We can't go. You're not such a firm guy. You don't keep so many halachas you don't keep. No, I am not relying on this document. I am not going to go and give a portion to the sister. I'm making macha. We need to do halachic Yerusha. Halacha. I'm so from, even though he's not so from. And what can he do? The other brothers have to go along. The daughter gets disinherited. Everybody feels bad for the daughter. But wait a second. No, wait. The daughter doesn't get disinherited because now there's a chayiv on the estate because the father made a chayiv of $15 million. So and now the estate was only worth $10 million. So once they want to go halachic, now the entire $10 million is going to go to the daughter. And then all of a sudden, a couple months later, everybody realizes so the daughter got the full $10 million. She's living well. And now the one who challenged the Yerusha, he seems to have recently got a lot of money. It looks like he has, his net worth went up $5 million. There could be collusion. One of the sons and the daughter could get together, and the son challenges the Yerusha, and then they split the profits. Yes, this could happen. So to avoid that, there was a later version of the shtar chatzi zachar that was developed, which said that whoever challenges the will give up his share, but he can't sabotage the entire system. He could just sabotage his section or his portion of the. So therefore, it's in nobody's best interest to challenge the Yerusha, challenge the document. Okay. Now, another point, it's become common practice to write a shtar mole zachar, not just a shtar chatzi zachar, or some like to say, play on the word shtar shalom zachar. That you give the daughter a full share. Now, it happens to be the Chazan Ish and the Chassam Sofer who are very against this idea of giving the daughter a full equal share. Listen. The Torah set it up in a way you're completely going against the Torah. You're completely going against the system. You're acting like a tzeduki. You're doing like the Goyim. You're learning from the Goyim. They were very against it. L'maisa, most poskim were okay with it, and it has become the minhag in many places. So l'maisa, we do let people do a shtar chatzi zachar. Now, something to point out is there are certain some more holes in the shtar chatzi zachar. It doesn't apply and work in every scenario. For example, let's say a woman enters a second marriage. I'm not referring to when she's 30 years old and she enters a second marriage. Whenever, she's 70 years old and he's 73, and a widow to a widower or something of the sort, and they're entering a second marriage. Now she wants her assets. How'd she have all of these assets? Good question. They arranged the stories properly before her first husband died, and she has assets like the wishes of her first husband. Okay, beseder. So she wants, after 120, her assets to go to her children. His children are not hers. And he wants, after 120, that his assets should go to his children and not her children. So how do you do this? How do you arrange it? Because once again, if she dies, who inherits her? Her children or her first or her second husband? Her second husband is the one who's going to inherit her, not her children. So how do we do this? How do we get the money to her children? So, yeah, I know what the answer is. She'll write a shtar chatzi zacher that she wants to tell is mechayev to tzedakah, whatever it is, more than the value of her estate. And if the husband doesn't follow the wills of her command, of her shtar, then if the husband doesn't follow it, then the husband will be mechayev $15 million to Hatzalah. The problem is that the woman cannot write this once she's married already to the second husband. Why not? Because all her assets are what we call nichsei melug. They are she is the owner, but the husband gets the rights of those assets. He gets the payers of those assets. Once we're in the marriage and the husband's getting the payers of those assets, the wife is no longer able to be mischayev them in a shtar choiv. So therefore, this shtar chatzi zacher will not work once the woman is already married in this second marriage. So how do we protect her assets in this second marriage? So the first option is before she gets married to the second individual, the second man, she should write it then. If she's mischayev her nechasim before she even gets married, then it works. Because it's not nixlei melug yet. If it's not nixlei melug yet, she can be mischayev it with the shtar chatzi zacher. So that's going to be okay. And once again, often these marriages, you're writing a prenup. If you're writing a prenup, so this will be bundled in with the prenup. Once again, use the firm lawyer. Now, what if you're already married? So if you're already married, it's too late for her to write a shtar chatzi zacher. The best that she could do is ask the husband to write a shtar chatzi zacher. And the husband's going to be mischayev himself. That after she dies, he's being mischayev to give the money to her kids. And, if he doesn't give it to her kids, then he's going to be mischayev to tzedakah $15 million or something of that sort. That's the best to do. And therefore, even if she dies, and let's say he inherits, but he's even at that point, he's in an old age home or something like that, he's not with it, he's Alzheimer's, whatever, at least we'll be able to say, even though it's not completely pashut, but we'll be able to say it's quite clear that he doesn't want to inherit and get that chayiv, and therefore the money will go to the children. Maybe we'll leave him a little bit to give him an incentive to let the money go to the children. And that's what we're going to do. Now, how much should this chayiv be for? I've been throwing out different numbers. I said more than the value of the estate, because if it's less than the value of the estate, it might not be worth it for the sons might not feel compelled to follow the wishes of the shtar. They might just, listen, I don't mind giving a couple $1 million away to that tzedakah or that daughter. There's so much more money there for me. So it should be more than the value of the estate. Now, but if it's a crazy amount, there's I'm going to give $100 million and the whole estate's worth $2 million, that gets a little not so pashut. Why? There's a concept of a smachta loikanya. If it's clear that you didn't really mean what you said, then it doesn't have a halachic effect. I'm going to give $100 million. You mean you're going to give $100 million? You're worth $2 million. Obviously, it was an exaggeration. It wasn't real. He didn't really mean it. And a smachta like Kanya. Therefore, what we try to do is more, but not like a crazy, crazy, crazy amount more. Meaning something that was within the realm of realistic at the time of writing, even if it was beyond expectation. Furthermore, we write, it is as if it was done in front of a Bezdin Chashiv. Once we write, it's as if it's done in front of a Bezdin Chashiv, then we generally don't refer to that as a smachta, because if it's in front of a Bezdin Chashiv, it's by definition not a smachta. Okay, another interesting point, something that comes up often. If somebody in Eretz Yisrael dies without writing a shtar, what happens is, half goes to his wife if his wife is still alive, and the other half is split amongst his sons and daughters equally. That's the law in Eretz Yisrael, it's the law in Israel, that's how it gets divvied up. In America, it's state dependent. Each state has its own way of how to divide it, so you just have to check up each state. I can't say the rules. Now, and even if, and what if you wrote a legal document without necessarily a halachic will, without doing a shtar chatzizaka, once again, it's going to follow that. Now, let's say we have erlich children, right? Everybody's erlich, nice erlich, and they want to follow the halacha. And they even know, maybe the father even told them, I want to do it like the halacha, but he didn't write a will. The courts will, both in America or Israel, the courts will only release the Yerusha to the sons if the daughters signed a waiver that they don't want to inherit. Because it's going to go to the sons. Once again, and there are some states in America that if you gave the daughters too small of a percentage, even with some form of a will, if you gave the daughters too little, they have to sign a waiver to release their rights to allow the boys to inherit. Fine. So if the husband didn't write a will, are the girls allowed to take the Yerusha? No, they're not allowed to take the Yerusha. It's Geneva. Halacha says that Yerusha goes to the boys, and Yerusha does not go to the daughters. If the girls try to grab that money, that's Geneva. They're going against the Torah. That's horrible. The Rishayim, they're not allowed to do that. And they definitely cannot go and decide to take the Yerusha that the Torah says they don't get. Okay, fine. What if they're not going to take the Yerusha? But for the boys to get the Yerusha, they have to sign a waiver that says they don't want the Yerusha. Do they have to sign that waiver? Or could they demand compensation to sign that waiver? So Zak the Marit, and by the way, I'm going to quote the famous machlokes between the Marit and the Marei Basan. So I'm just letting you know this Yerusha fighting is not a new thing. This has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I'm going to say it again for the fifth time. Write a halachic will. Make it clear, make it fair. Because if not, you'll have families destroyed by what you could have saved in a couple of hours and a couple $1,000. You could have saved a family, and people have, because they didn't do this, doiros of fighting. So please write a will. It's in your best interest. Okay, so the Marit says, listen, the girls can't get any use of this money. It's for the boys. It's the boys' money. The girls can't get any use from it. By the girls not signing, they have nothing to gain by not signing, and they're causing the boys to lose. That's midas time, to not let the boys gain when it doesn't help you to not sign. And you're stopping the boys from gaining. That's midas time. By midas time, there's a concept of somebody's being over midas time. Bezdin's allowed to force them to sign. Zok the Marit, you could force the girls to sign. Furthermore, it's hashavas aveda. It's the boys' money, and the girls have a way of returning the money to the boys. Hashavas aveda. So it's an isser. They're not allowed to not return the money to the boys. We're koifin aleim. It's hashavas aveda. They have to sign. They cannot demand compensation. Zok the Marei Basan. The Marei Basan says that, wait a second, they could charge for their services. You want me to sign? I charge. So let's say there's let's just pick a number. 4 boys and a girl and a $5 million Yerusha. So the girl says, you have to pay me properly, you want me to sign. Let's say, maybe how much could she ask? Let's say she says, what are my fees? Oh, you want my fees to sign? I charge $1 million to sign. You want me to sign to release the Yerusha to you? I charge $1 million. I have a right to sign. And the Divrei Chaim explain the Marei Basan, since you asking her to do an action, she has all the right in the world to charge for her action. It's not, nothing. If it was nothing, then it would be midas time. But she has to do an action. Doing an action, you can't force her to do the action. She could charge for it. Now, how much could she charge for it? So the Ben Ish Chai says the minhag in Turkey and in other places in the Spanish world was 10% of the boys' portion. So let's, for example, if each boy was getting $1 million, she could charge $100,000 as her signing fee. That's what she's allowed to charge. Rav Vadia quotes this 10%, and he goes with it as well, that she's allowed to charge up to 10% of the boys' portion to sign the waiver to release the funds. in the Ashkenazi world, there is no clear consensus of how much she is allowed to sign. Some places want to adopt this 10% rule, even though it's not the clear minhag Ashkenaz. Some people want to charge a full 100%. This is one of those things that causes quite a bit of machlokes on how much she could charge how much she could charge to sign that waiver. But L'maisa, there is no consensus, and different Batei Dinim have different ways of trying to deal with this. It's always going to end up in somewhat of a pshara whenever this comes to Bezdin. What level of pshara, that's totally on the Bezdin. But L'maisa, we allow her, the minhag everywhere actually, is we allow her to charge, not everywhere, I think in Nissen Corral it says that she has to sign without charging, but in most Batei Dinim, the minhag is we allow her to charge for her services of signing, and it's not just $1,000 to go sign. She could charge real money, maybe 10% of a portion, maybe more, for her to sign that waiver and release the funds to her brothers. Thank you for listening.